Dear Advocate, thank you first and foremost for being invited. It's very kind of you, and I'm really grateful to be here in your community. And effectively, I would like to speak to you about a very tragic period of common history, the Hungarian history, as well as the Jewish history. So I will speak about rescue efforts made by foreign diplomats in Hungary and by Hungarian diplomats in abroad. In order, okay, so the screen isn't too big. In fact, what you should know is that in Hungary after World War I, there were several anti-Jewish pieces of legislation. The first was after World War I. This had the purpose to diminish the number of the Jewish students on the universities, and the law wanted to reduce the number of the students more or less to their percentage in the national population. This had, by the way, also such a consequence that such people like Eugene Neumann or Edward Teller or Leo Szilard, so all those who were, by the way, later around the plutonium bomb and atomic bomb, so they had to leave the country in order to make their studies in abroad. After Hitler's arrival to power, there were also some new pieces of legislation. So at that time, they were in a kind of sympathy on behalf of the current Hungarian policy to the Nazi policy political successes. But in fact, all these pieces of legislation were at that time adopted from sovereign will. And during World War II, there were also some pieces of legislation where a kind of pressure on behalf of the Nazi Germany can be felt. And so, contrary to the previous approach, when Jew meant kind of a religion, is that religion, so the last pieces of legislation were based on the racial approach and the number of different exceptions, like heroism witnessed in World War I, or persecution suffered during the Bolshevik Revolution in 1990, or later in the neighboring countries, or to be an outstanding scientist or actor. So all these became less and less these exceptions. You should also know that Hungary was the so-called unwilling satellite of Nazi Germany, and that was a kind of a policy to leave the axis and to try to get closer to the Anglo-Saxon line. However, in 44, Germany occupied Hungary, and at that time, kind of a collaborationist government was put in place. At that time, the governor, the head of state, tried to follow such a policy, which was made also by the Danish king Christians, so to withdraw from the effective exercise of power. But this had as a consequence that this was the collaborationist prime minister and the member of his government who issued more and more orders restricting the life of the Jewish community in Hungary. There were quasi 100 or even more orders of that time. If we can see these different orders issued by the government of 44, we can see some which are containing, let's say, in humiliation, like the prohibition to wear military uniform, prohibition to wear school uniform. So in fact, in order to suggest that the Jewish community should be considered as a second-class citizen or even less. There was another type of these pieces of legislation, and which was kind of expropriation of the Jewish property. And there were also a third type of orders which tried to to reduce the communication possibilities of the Jewish community. At that time, so during the occupation, Adolf Eichmann was in Hungary. His legal status was at that time the counselor to the Hungarian government and to the Hungarian Ministry of Home Affairs. Nevertheless, his suggestions, his ideas were considered quasi as an order by the Hungarian partners in the Hungarian Ministry of Interior. And I colored with yellow those which can be considered, let's say, the most important from these orders. And there you can see also the designation of premises to be used for Jews accommodation purposes. Under this neutral title, in fact, this was the ghettoization and the obligation to put yellow David shield on the houses, the premises where Jews were living. The regent tried to get rid from this collaborationist government in July, August 44, and there was a kind of military government which was put on place, but it was in fact reversed in October 44 when clearly Nazi party arrived to the power with the assistance of Nazi Germany. And so, in fact, and I will speak on that quite a lot, that there was an order concerning the ghettos. And there were two ghettos. There were the so-called big ghetto, and there was also the so-called international ghetto. I made you a map about Budapest, and in this map you can see the big ghetto conceived for hosteling, figuratively, at least 80,000 Jews. And there is also the so-called international ghetto. The big ghetto was surrounded with a wall. And there was no wall around the international ghetto. There were, however, some police control at the different streets going to the so-called international ghetto. For those who have already been to Budapest, maybe you can recognize that we are in the center of the city. This is the building of the parliament, and a couple of meters, and some 100 meters to the north. This is the international ghetto. Some 100 meters to the east. This is the big ghetto. The deportation of the Hungarian Jewry to Auschwitz and to the other extermination camps occurred mostly under the so-called Stoye government, under the collaborationist government in April, May, June, and July of 44. And so this concerned the Jewry of the countryside. At that time, the governor did not take part in the effective exercise of the power, and with this, let's say, lack of action, he effectively contributed to the deportation. So the Budapest Jewry was not deported, and when the government considered that he can be a bit stronger because the Allies were already debarking in Normandy, and so the Americans and the British troops were advancing. At that time, Regent Horthy stepped in and tried to put an end to the deportation. However, in October 44, so he was reversed by this Nazi putsch. After that, there was a very strange situation. On the one hand, there was a clear pro-Nazi government in Hungary, arrived to the power by a putsch, by a plot. The government wanted, however, to get some international recognition on behalf, at least, of the neutral states, like Switzerland, Sweden, and so on. And so that's why there was a kind of a bargaining between this government and the so-called neutral countries. And the aim of this bargaining was, on one hand, to let the Budapest jury to emigrate eventually in the future to these countries, and the counter value could be according to the ideas of the prime minister of the time, for a kind of recognition for that. In fact, recognition has not been granted. Nevertheless, this continuous bargaining about the immigration possibility was very important in this whole tragic history. I will speak about foreign diplomats and Hungarian diplomats. And in fact, you should know, sorry, the screen is not too high. Nevertheless, what is interesting in the composition of the Hungarian diplomacy at that time is that those the diplomats were composed, let's say, from at least 4 classes. There were the so-called the old guard people, so those who were educated during the Austro-Hungarian monarchy and who were serving in the diplomacy of Prince Joseph and then Charles IV for us. A second part of these diplomats were entering into the foreign ministry already during the independence period of Hungary, so 1918, 1919, 1920, so the old boys. And in fact, the old guards and the old boys, even if they had a certain eventual German sympathy, but they could not be considered as pro-Nazi people. They had a very, very good knowledge about the real power in the world and real power sharing of the world politics. Those who entered into the diplomacy after 1933, so after Hitler's arrival at the power, maybe in this group, the pro-Nazism can be more felt. And there was, let's say, a fourth group within the foreign ministry, and this is once again very strange. They were the students of Professor Teleki, who was several times vice prime minister. He was also minister for education. He was also responsible for 2 anti-Jewish pieces of legislation. Nevertheless, he was a clear pro-Anglo-Saxon person, and he tried to keep Hungary out from World War II. Finally, he committed a suicide in 1941. In fact, all his students whom he invited to the foreign ministry were mostly sent to the press department or to the political department, and they were mandated to manage the so-called secret negotiations with the Anglo-Saxon powers. And so they were all at home in Budapest, or they were in abroad. And in fact, for those who were in abroad, who were serving as consuls in the occupied countries of Europe, entered into the spot and tried to save the life of Hungarian Jewish citizens living in different Western European countries. Maybe those who were present in the Auschwitz Memorial Lecture of 2022 remember the lecture given by Professor Eli Salzberger, who was speaking about the fact how a Hungarian consul saved his mother's property. Thank you very much. His mother's property and her flat. And in fact, it was a certain Arthur Jäger, who was the Hungarian consul in Amsterdam, and apparently he succeeded to save about 80 people from the Westerbork camp. There was also a person, Mr. Gang, who was the consul in Brussels, and he also succeeded to to save people from the deportation. Here, there is the photocopy of a paper, an attestation of brevity and courage of someone, a certain Maximilian Brunner. And here the attestation says that, well, he was chief lieutenant during World War I. He is the holder of different medals, and so that's why he's for us. Nevertheless, this is a very tragic story, because first he was saved. He was changed with another person on the train, but half a year later, he was once again arrested. And at that time, the Hungarian diplomats could not save him, so till the whole bureaucracy could put into motion. At that time, he did not leave anymore. Concerning the occupied France, about 90 Hungarian Jews were saved by the consuls working in Paris. There were also some efforts at the Vichy consulate, who is also a kind of important person in these rescue operations. This is Mr. Sass, who was working in Italy, and after 43, when Hussein was reversed, but then when he came back, so it was at that time that Mr. Sass delivered so many attestations in order to save Hungarian Jews living in Rome or in the northern part of Italy. Concerning Mr. Velic, who was our envoy in Athens, he succeeded to set up a common standing of Argentinian, Turkish, Swiss, and Spanish and Hungarian embassies or legations in order to save the respective Jewish citizens of these countries, and not to let them deported to Auschwitz. On the other hand, concerning the Hungarian diplomats working at home in Budapest, there were also some rescuing activities there. The chief person of this was Mr. Szegedi Massad, who was the leader of the political department, and he arranged the travel of Hungarian Jewish children from Hungary to Palestine. And according to the different journals and documents, some 1,000 could be considered as being saved in that way. On the other hand, there were also some failed operations. There was such an immigration operation where the people should have been brought by the steamship Struma from Constanța, Romania, to Haifa. However, in the Black Sea, a Soviet submarine sank this steamship, and everybody died there. There was also a very strange story from the end of July '44, when the Regent Horthy tried to become active, as I mentioned, and there was certain negotiations, secret negotiations with the British and the American side about the immigration possibility of the Budapest jury. And this is the so-called Horthy affair. Apparently, the suggestion was to let 40,000 people to emigrate if they wish from Hungary to Palestine. However, due to the length of the bureaucracy and to the problems of the British Empire, and the British were apparently anxious what would be the reaction of the Arab population in Palestine, seeing the arrival of several thousand Hungarian Jews. So in fact, this operation was not realized due to this strange bureaucratic reluctance on behalf of the British. However, what is very strange is that all the materials of these negotiations can be found, and you can find that on the PDF. And here there is a small reflection on that in the Randolph Graham's monumental books about the Holocaust in Hungary, and on an American homepage, and you can find the internet link for this, the photocopy of all the negotiations which were meant through the Red Cross in Geneva or through the Swiss Foreign Ministry on Bern can be read. Very interesting. Concerning Budapest as such, as I mentioned, there were orders about the ghettoization, and according to some historians, very strange, but in 1944, during the ghettoization, 1944 houses were designated in order to have the mandatory David shield on them. And as I mentioned, at the orders were issued about the ghettoization, and in fact, the big ghetto is about there. So it's here, and the international ghetto is here. So what happened? This is my map first. So on the one hand, we should speak about the foreign legations in Budapest, and the Swedish rescue operation. This is the best known because of the tragic fate of Mr. Wallenberg. The Swiss were also very active on that, and in fact, you can see that the Swedish bought or rented 50 premises in order to put the rescue people. Some were, and in fact, on the map you can see the small flags with the Swedish colors. You can see also the colors, Spanish colors, those colors. It's not so clear, but there are also the synagogues in Hungary, or let's say Jewish. So in fact, there was a certain, I don't dare to say that military logic concerning the purchase of these properties on behalf of the Swiss and the Swedish legation. Nevertheless, what can be said is that when there is something belonging to the Israeli community, whether it's a hospital or whether it's a synagogue or a special school, a rescue building is somewhere in the neighborhood. And by the way, what was the main line of the policy is to put as many people as possible to the international ghetto. And this required, in fact, different attestations on behalf of the different legations. There was also, by the way, some special buildings for those who had the exception letter delivered by Regent Horthy or the member of the government. These were outstanding actors or great scholars, and for them there were also, in fact, two buildings within the international ghetto, and there was a special building here. This was Hotel Pannonia, hotel as such, and this was designated to host the Romanian diplomats waiting for their repatriation from Hungary to Romania. But at the same time, the Hotel Pannonia was also a kind of a center for the rescued Jewish people. And you will see soon the logic of all this. You can see the so-called Schutzpasses, so the protection papers delivered by the different legations. And you can see the most important people there. Envoy Danielson, Mr. Wallenberg in the middle, and then Per Langer. Here you can see the signature of Danielson. Here also the Wallenberg signal, and this is Wallenberg's full signature. And if I see well, you'll see my screen is so small. In fact, so you can see that this is a, let's say, individual protection paper, and the other paper, which was delivered by Wallenberg, is written that it is on the list of the collective passport. As I mentioned, the Swiss was also very active. In fact, the Swiss bought or rented 80 premises in Budapest, and they also delivered protection papers. You can see two of that. With Karl Lutz, who was the chief of this operation. See the coat of arms of Switzerland. And there are also two other protection papers. And see the coat of arms here. This is not red. The coat of arms, this is white. And even if this paper is colored, but here this is black. So I assume that these are already forged rescue papers. Okay, there is nothing unethical therein, because they had to save life for that. But in fact, it's true that there were a kind of a forgery activity linked also with the Zionist resistance movement of Budapest. I will turn on that. The International Committee of the Red Cross was active on the one hand through the Swiss branch, and there Mr. Friedrich Born and Hans Reiermann, who were the masterminds of the operation. And here, those who are closer, who will see that in the paper form or on your internet, can see that the attestation says that Mr. X or Mrs. Y is the employee of the Swiss Red Cross in Budapest. This is the Swedish Red Cross, and this was Mr. Waldemar Langle. He was, by the way, the Swiss language lecturer at the university. In fact, as I mentioned, that here is Hotel Pannonia. Today, this is already building at the university. But in fact, this is the whole university compound of Budapest. And in fact, Mr. Waldemar Langle, as a member of the Swedish Red Cross, was involved in that. And so if someone has the paper, it was rather easy to get closer path, and going from one protected seat to another one, and then to another one, to another one. In a couple of days, past these, let's say, two kilometers in order to be admitted in the so-called international ghetto, waiting there for eventual immigration possibility. This is the Spanish protection paper. It's the previous one were in Hungarian and German, Hungarian, Swedish, German. This is only in Hungarian. And so I read what is written. This is Angel Sanz, who envoy, who signed that. So I certify hereby that family members of Mr. and Mrs. Neuser have submitted immigration application in Madrid for their relatives, and the delegation is mandated by the Spanish Foreign Ministry to deliver the immigration visa even prior to the final decision about the application. This is the Portuguese protection paper, where Mr. Garrido or Mr. Branquinho certified that Mrs. Pető is the sister of an employee of the delegation. So they did not say that she is also the employee of the delegation. Nevertheless, this was something, and you know, Hungary and so many countries in Eastern and Central Europe are very bureaucratic countries. So for sometimes what is important is to see a paper, why to do in this way or why to do that way. And if there is a paper, nicely stamped, it generally okay, it works. This is the protection paper delivered by the Holy See by Monsignor Angelo Rotta. Here, this is the simplest one. There is no photo. There is only identification data telling that Mrs. is under the protection of the Holy See. Despite of not having anything special security measure in the paper, this was that one which had the greatest value. That the so-called Hungarian Nazis did not want to throw away, contrary to some the paper. There was also some people who were very active on behalf of the foreign countries, and in fact, Mr. Mantello, having also Hungarian origin, he was the consul honoraire in Bern, in Switzerland, and in fact, he sent some empty papers to the Swiss legations in order to deliver that in Hungary. And there was also a very important Dutch personality, Mr. Flederus, who organized the so-called children train after World War I in order to save Hungarian children from the starvation. And in fact, he was apparently also active in 1944 in Hungary in order to save the Hungarian Jews. There were some Hungarians working in these legations. What I would like to emphasize as a name, this is, for instance, Mr. Kálai, who was the nephew of the prime minister, already at that time under German arrest, or Mr. Langfelder, who disappeared together with Mr. Wallenberg and died somewhere, probably in Moscow in the Lubyanka. Or Mr. Illich, who was the responsible for the building of the American embassy, but because we were in belligerent status with the US, this was Switzerland, which was the protecting power for the US interest in Hungary, and those who were somewhere in Budapest, you could see that the building of the American embassy is a huge one. And so it also served as a kind of rescue building. And in fact, this is all this is linked also with some maneuvering within the Hungarian foreign ministry at that time. During the German occupation and also after the Nazi putsch, this was the Ministry of Interior, which was very strongly pro-Nazi and in favor of the deportations, in favor of the so-called final solution. And in fact, the diplomats, or some of the diplomats, tried to hamper these criminal activity. And in fact, there was a person from the old guard, so from an ex-Austro-Hungarian diplomat, Mr. Arnoldi Jungert, who wanted to resign after the German occupation. Nevertheless, so this on the proposal of his fellows, he accepted to act as deputy foreign minister, and according to the minutes of the government, he was continuously warning on the very negative echo of the deportations from Hungary in the neutral press. He warned the government that post-war retaliations can be expected soon. And he was also in close contact with Angelo Rotta. And so when I mentioned some minutes ago the so-called Horthy affair and the possibility of emigration for 40,000 Budapest Jews, so the idea of the plan at the end of July 44, he was behind that unsuccessful operation. Mr. Villani, the second gentleman, well decorated, at that he was an old diplomat at that time in pension. Nevertheless, he wanted to profit from the possibility to deliver different attestations about courage and bravery witnessed during World War I, or persecution suffered after in 1919 or in 1920 or later in the neighboring countries. Mr. Sentivani, he was also a so-called Teleki ex-student, and according to the ideas of Teleki, he wanted to establish a kind of a network in the foreign ministry, in other ministries, which could help the state to work after a successful jumping out from the war. Mr. Sós, he was working with Sentivani. He was in contact with Mr. Wallenberg. He was the person who organized the translation of the Auschwitz Protocol, which convinced finally Horthy to change his attitude and to become more active on that. After the unsuccessful jumping out act, Mr. Sós was sent as a secret envoy to the Italian territory already occupied by the Allied forces. However, there he was put in a friendly captivity, and although he was bringing with him different important military information, with that this was not taken seriously. And Mr. Sebestyén, he was the director of the International Law Department, and he was also advocating in favor of a more generous, or as a correct behavior vis-à-vis the Jewish population of Hungary, 44, warning his superiors that whatever other policy would hamper the status of the Hungarians living in the belligerent countries or living even in the neutral countries. And in fact, as I mentioned, the people in the Home Ministry for Home Affairs were at that time pro-Nazi sympathizers. However, Mr. Sebestyén was put in the delegations, and he was also in contact with Sir Edmund Wesenmayer. The Wesenmayer for us is the same, like for you, Arthur Sexinka. So he was, in fact, the mastermind of the Holocaust in Hungary. Wesenmayer. Nevertheless, after World War II, Mr. Sebestyén did not suffer any any real harm. For a while, he could continue his activity within the foreign ministry. And in fact, this idea, probably according to the policy established by Mr. Arnold, was to grant special status for Jews having foreign nationalities, whether from belligerent country or from neutral countries, or working for international organizations. And so that's why there were more and more people who were granted attestations that they are the new cook of the Swiss legation, or that hospital owned by the Swiss Red Cross or other organization. And there are also some other people, though Mr. Keresztes, who was apparently the member of an armed resistance group, or Mr. Todt, who was also in the press department as a former Teleki student. He was also responsible for the delivery of some attestation papers, and he was behind the Hotel Pannonia rescue. By the way, he was my uncle. And Mr. Gogolak is also a very strange story, because on the one hand, he was a freshman in the foreign ministry, and invited by his friend, his schoolmate, Mr. Count Kamei, who was the foreign minister, whose wife made some promises to Wallenberg. And apparently, the foreign minister Kamei wanted to realize the promises made by his wife to Wallenberg, and he made that through Mr. Gogolak and some people close to Mr. Kamei was saved in that way. And we can, in fact, continue. That what were the methods and means of rescuing? In fact, there were appeal on goodwill, humanity, Christian faith, and courage. There was also to hide as many people as possible in their own home or in the home of good friends and reliable people. Legal professionalism in debates and discussions, or use of disposition on exceptions, brevity in World War I, or exceptional scientific results, etc., etc. Execution of instructions received from the top. We should take care to prevent that the German nationalize those properties which should belong to Mr. X and anyway to Hungary. So sometimes, in fact, the idea on behalf of the ministry was not only purely personal, it was also purely economical. Why for the Germans? It's for Hungary. But anyway, in this way, they could save, however, the life of we can also speak about bribery as a means, about the documentation forgery, blackmailing, threatening. There is nothing unethical. That is taking into consideration the conditions and circumstances of that. There was also cooperation with the rescue activity of the different Catholic or Protestant missions. There was also sporadic cooperation with the Zionist resistance movement, and there was also sporadic cooperation with the resistance movement of some Hungarian military officers. And in fact, there was also lack of action when someone get an information that rescue activity, forbidden rescue activity, is managed in the neighborhood. In fact, you could have seen a good 2,000 Hungarian diplomats who were taking part in this rescuing activity. They were probably more. This was whom I could identify through the different documents and scientific scholarly works that I could consult, and they succeeded to save some 1,000 people. But in fact, this is this is a big number in itself. However, it's relatively very small vis-à-vis all those who were not saved, and also the number of those who were either indifferent or concerning the persecutions, or who were executing blindly and mechanically the inhuman legislation, or those who wanting to get recognition or even economic remuneration from the spoliation. So comparing with all this, we can speak only about excluded people. And in fact, if we do a certain calculation, that 2/3 of the countryside Jewry perished in the Holocaust, and one half of the Budapest Jewry perished also. You can ask also what happened with these people who were active in the rescue missions. Concerning Mr. Wallenberg, you know him. Concerning all the other diplomats, whether this is Angelo Rotta, whether this is Karl Lutz and Danielson, everybody was expelled from Hungary by the Soviet army in April 45. Concerning the Hungarian, and when they went back to their home countries, whether this is Switzerland, whether this is Sweden, or other countries, in fact, they were rather admonished and reprimanded because of dispensing too much money without any clear authorization on behalf of their national foreign ministry. And in fact, their rehabilitation occurred only about in the end of the 60s or in the 70s. Concerning the Hungarians, some of them left the country in 44 or soon after. Some were maintained for a while in the foreign ministry. After that, they were kicked. Most of these people, because of the internal links with Wallenberg and others, were suspected as being US or British spies in Hungary. And so, in fact, some of them were kept also by the secret services to work for them. And after that, in fact, very often they were sentenced for spying, and they were executed. So in fact, there are so many human and individual tragedies therein. However, in fact, this is the tragedy of the whole humanity and the whole mankind, and that we shouldn't forget at all. When you will have some time this afternoon, it's interesting to check the closeness of these buildings. And in fact, at least what is a symbolical recognition currently, the fact is that here the K of Budapest, this is named according to different rescuing people, whether this is Wallenberg, whether this is Sampaio Caribou, whether this is Angel Sandwich, and so on. So at least currently they are on the right place in the collective memory. And thank you very much for the comment.
We take a few questions.
Sure.
I'll start with a simple question. I noticed when you talked about the Magen David, you called it David Shield.
Yeah.
Not the Star of David. That's the Hungarian.
We use both. We use David Star or David Shield. I don't know which is the. In Hungary, we are using it parallelly and parallel form. Yeah.
The Magen David. Magen David, the Shield.
Yeah.
All languages, it's always referred to stuff.
I had two questions. The first question was regarding Raoul Wallenberg. You had close to 50 establishments which he acquired, I assume that required a lot of funds, and he was working semi-automatically, without the funding of the government. So how did he afford to acquire all those buildings?
In fact, what there was the so-called War Refugee Board. It's an American,
Right.
American.
So they funded his activities.
Yeah, yes, it's clear. So in fact, it's sure that Wallenberg did not work only for the Swedish foreign ministry. He came from Sweden, of course, and the Soviet spy network was also very active in Stockholm, and so apparently, so it's rather clear that the Soviets had knowledge, more or less, since the beginning about the missions of Wallenberg, and in fact, concerning the disparition, abduction of Wallenberg and his disappearance in the Lubyanka jail, there are also some ideas that the Soviets wanted to get money, and Wallenberg, and they suspected Wallenberg that they have knowledge about hidden Jewish treasures or artistic objects, paintings, and so on. This is one. The other is, in fact, involvement in money. The second one is this World Refugee Board and its relationship with the OSS, predecessor of the CIA, and so on. Yeah, but so, in fact, the money was not from the US and mostly from the World Refugee Board.
My other question was, you didn't mention the activities of what's the name, Raoul Wallenberg and the Zionist delegation, and their negotiation was directly with the SS, with Eichmann and Fritz. Why didn't they work with the Hungarian? They were Hungarian citizens.
Yes.
So why did they go directly to the SS to save Jews from deportation? Why didn't they contact the practices?
Yes, you know the Joel Brandt mission and the Kastner train story. This is also something which is very complicated, and there I am not an expert on that. What I learned in the paper about the negotiations with the 40,000 people, so the 40 of in July 44. One of the reasons of suspicion on behalf of British was whether this has some link with the Joel Brandt mission. So I don't know how to translate it. The translation that gold against blood, or tracks against blood. So in fact, there are different translations of this operation. So in fact, the British apparently was suspicious that these idea about the 40,000 people should have some link with the other mission where the SS, Himmler's SS was involved. And so to check that, this took also certain time, and that was one of the reasons that the British was reluctant for that. This is what I could see in the documents that I read.
I mean, it's fascinating research that you've conducted and clearly done in a very meticulous manner. I mean, the documents that you show, the archival records, the statistics, the photographs, it's clearly an incredible effort that you invested. What motivated you to do this work, and are you planning on publishing it?
On the one hand, this is linked to the story of my uncle. And so this is, let's say, a chapter of that, and I was working quite a lot on that because, in fact, when he was interrogated and he was trial, and the authorities did not accept contrary all the pieces of evidences that he could that he effectively participated in this discrimination. So there was also a kind of personal thing therein, and the whole World War II story and Hungary and World War II. What is the position? Why Hungary could not realize the so-called jumping out? This is very interesting, and I am not a historian. My grandfather was a professor of history, by the way, so I like that subject. It was a kind of interesting, and yes. So this was when Rabbi Katzman invited me to speak. I opted for that topic and not for the topic about that I could not speak.
Parallel diplomatic lines to save different people, or did they have also some conflicts between the international diplomats that were?
That was effectively that was, so that there are links that there are information that Kovacs and Wallenberg cooperating also together, and also because of the closeness. And when there was control that or that issue building, soon we had information on that, sometimes also that they recall and they say from one place to another one. In order to reach the pattern, so international. Professor chapter for that. Impressed by the one question. Let's say it's the plan. It's the plan. I should have time for this.
But it's the best.
Yeah, it's a, yeah.
PowerPoint Plus.
Yes, and there are PowerPoint, there are the different scientific credits, internet links. Most of them are from Hungary, but in fact, there are those which are in English, and they are really useful to consult.
Okay.